welcome to Up Close with Carlos Sang, celebrating art, entertainment, and the human spirit. Welcome to another episode of Up Close with Carlos Sang. My next guest is an award-winning writer, director, producer, and performer whose show CSI Crime Scene Improvisation is returning to the Wilton tour for its 10th anniversary tour. It's a wonderful privilege to be able to introduce the wonderful Lee Apsey. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hello, thank you for having me.
So it's the 10th anniversary of CSI Crime Scene Improvisation. You had a wonderful show at Wilton's earlier this year, and it's coming back later this month. Why do you think this show has been so successful with audiences for so long?
Well, we built the show from the ground up to be like maximize improv. Like, why is it improvised? How do we make sure the audience win and get the most fun out of it? And that's why we made it a murder mystery. So you get to like really play with us. Well, things you say really pay off in this show. So one like the sort of magic trick or like big shtick is that no one knows who the killer is, not even the cast. And genuinely, no one in the show knows who the killer is until the very last moment when the audience chooses who the killer is and always has been. And we then have to make that make sense. And of course, we're doing that by looping back to suggestions the audience gave us at the start of the show. So, I mean, 1-2 years into the show, we could have convinced ourselves it was good marketing. But at 10 years, and with a lot of audiences coming back multiple times, which is lovely, it's kind of saved my self-esteem by assuring me that genuinely this does work and that people do like it. We've got people come like every year in Edinburgh, who's on their about fifth year at this point, which is really lovely.
Oh wow! I mean, like when you first started developing the show, did you always have in mind that this would be that this formula would work, and that audiences would warm to it, and 10 years down the line it would still be performed?
We didn't necessarily know if we'd go 10 years. I remember our first meeting, we sort of gathered the people that we wanted in this show. We brought everyone in for like development. We like practiced and rehearsed and polished for the first 6 months before doing a show. And in session one, we sort of shared what our hopes and dreams were. And Rachel Fawn said, I hope that one day someone might possibly pay some money to see this. And now, 10 years later, we've been selling out for about 10 years now. And I think the show's a really good place. So we were all very hardcore and driven to make the show as good as it can be and to do something interesting with improv. But I don't think we expected it would get this big, frankly. But yeah, nice surprise.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I feel like theatre generally, it requires lots of preparation to put on a show. How do you go about preparing an improvisation show?
Improv rehearsals are like, it's like sports training. Whereas if you've in like boxing, you'll like learn how to throw a jab and you'll think like, turn your shoulder, step your foot. But then when you're actually sparring, you don't think, your body just does it. You just do it enough consciously that it becomes subconscious and muscle memory. And we're basically doing that, except instead of throwing jabs and hooks, we're just like emotionally connecting and really caring about small details. It's that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, you are, you're a writer, you're a performer, director, producer. Which of these sorts of roles would you say that you connect to the most as well?
I think it's changed over time. Like my background when we started CSI was in writing, and that's why that's why we designed a show that has improv. It can be free and wild, but it'll have like a guaranteed climax. All like the structure stuff is like baked into it being a whodunit and how that gets solved. And then I think I sort of swayed between. I didn't really think myself as a performer when we first started. I was like a writer director. Like a lot of producers, I ended up producing because I wanted to get things done. And then now I have friends who are fresh actors who point out that I do more acting for money than they do. So yeah, I feel if I classify myself down, I think I'm a writer director at heart.
Yeah, I mean, for a show like CSI as well, you've got this pretty incredible cast, and you're all, putting on the show, on the
Mm.
spot very much. How hard is it, to assemble a cast of actors to put on a show like CSI?
I think when you put together a cast, this is true in anything. It's true scripted as well, but especially for CSI and improv show, you're like cooking because what you get out of each scene is a unique chemistry between performers. Like if we had a show and it was 6 players on stage who are all like me, I think that would be terrible. We need some people like Danielle Downey's got this wonderful like madness energy to her. Steve Bond as well, the smartest people you'll ever meet. Sarah Kempton's a really strong, like committed actor. Nicola Lucy's very technical. James Caan used to be a stand-up and he brings some of that energy to it. You're not necessarily needing everything from everyone. You're sort of building this cast that are going to create the magic between them, if that makes sense.
Mm. You were at Wilton's Music Hall earlier in the year, back in I think June, July. And I was wondering, why do you think that this show, sat particularly well in that space too? And what is it like performing in that venue?
Oh, it's absolutely amazing because Wilton's Music Hall, it goes back to the 1700s, I believe, and then the 1800s start turned into being a music hall. It's the oldest running music hall in the world, and it's you feel it in the room because it predates microphones. So like the acoustics, your sense of connection to people in the space is so strong. And obviously, if you're doing an improv show, that's what you want. You want to be able to like feel every audience member. You want someone to like titter a little bit in the back row and you feel it from the stage and you tune into what people are reacting to. So Wilton's like for us, really is a dream space. It really does feel like another level, just to like the darn good craftsmanship of that space. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look back at your first shows, I think that was it was the old Red Lion pub back in Moorgate. It's a very different venue.
Yeah.
How do you sort of like adapt the show for the different places that you play?
There are differences. And I think a lot of it's being careful on how we choose the spaces we're in as well. Because obviously, if you've got starting in like, you don't even have a stage, which is in the corner of a pub upstairs, is very different to being in like rooms that are, 500 people and you're stretched 20 meters across the stage. I think like the main elements don't change. We wear radio mics now, so you can reach people further. We're careful on how we set it up to make sure that when the audience interrogates suspects, we can see and talk to people in the audience. We're all better performers 10 years later, obviously. But I think the core DNA hasn't changed. So we want, even if you are in a room of like, Wilton's is 350, if there's 350 of you in there, we still want each of you to feel like you are part of this gang, building this together. And then we will talk to you. If you've got a question, we'll see you and you can chat. And you can see that detective over there who's really into it. So, yeah, I think the DNA is the same. It's how we recreate that feeling of like intimacy and playing a game together in larger venues.
Yeah, of course. How different would you say audiences are in different places that you play to? Would you say Edinburgh is particularly different to London, for example?
Yeah, like they're really interesting. And because we talk to the audience a lot during the show, like you really get a sense of different audiences. So Edinburgh, one of the things that I love about them, our shows are 3 p.m. most years. A lot of people have started drinking already. And they're at a festival, so they're largely on holiday. There are local people too, but a lot of the audience are on holiday effectively. And they have different kinds of enthusiasm. So at the Fringe, that people have seen a lot of shows. So they tend to be very specific. They're like, oh, I've seen, 30 shows this week about dolphins or about crime. I want to get a really specific detail about like forensic psychology into this. They thought about it in advance. And you get some places where it's got more of like a more sort of a stand-up and comedy vibe from the audience. They're more into sort of like cheering back and forth. And there are some places where they're more drilled into theatre. So really, it does adapt to the audience. And I find we don't tend to get audiences that are necessarily more or less enthusiastic. They're just enthusiastic in different ways, if that makes sense. They've got different interests and passions. Some people are really there for chaos. Some people are really there for like a real procedural, and they'll kind of guide you with that. And oddly enough, they do tend to, as you say, like yeah, they tend to be pretty locked in as a crowd energy in different cities. So I'd say Edinburgh. I'd say is about 40% sillier than shows we do in other places because their bar is so high because they've probably seen a clown show where someone's covered in slime like right before us. Whereas if you go and play a lot of theatres around the UK, they will have perhaps been seeing straight theatre, then some, like stage Shakespeare. Maybe this is like the first time they've seen an improv show. They're really into it, but they're not quite as confident in how much they can affect the show. So we sort of tease that out of them a little bit. We make them feel like, yes, if you say, did he know you're having an affair with his husband, we're going to say yes to it. And we're going to treasure that. And we're going to make you win.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. I feel like improv, it sometimes doesn't always get the best rep, and it doesn't always get taken as seriously as Shakespeare or opera. Would you say improv is a great art form too?
Um, yes, I'd say great art form too. I don't think any art form needs to be like argued above or below others. I find it's kind of funny. I do kind of like people making fun of improv. I think it's healthy to have an art form that you think is wonderful and joyous and also objectively kind of dumb. I think that's a good attitude to have. I once there was an article that described improv as the punk rock of comedy, and I felt that was a little. I thought that was going too far, personally. Yeah, I know. I can understand the frustration if someone spent years writing a script and then we come along and make something through a sense of playfulness. But it doesn't need to be better or worse. I think it's like if someone like okay, let's say objectively, someone proved on a scale, despite the amount of work for the show. If someone's like, I proved with science this took less effort than an hour of stand-up. You're like, cool. Did people enjoy it? Yes. Good. Every time I read a review as well, we have a lot of reviewers nowadays. You didn't used to get reviews in improv like 10 years ago. Nowadays you can. Generally after showstopper won the Olivier, and some reviews start with like, improv can be toe-curlingly embarrassing and awfully cringeworthy, but this show is great. And they don't need to start with that. But whenever people put those things in, it's like, look, I've seen really bad versions of basically every art form. I think if you've seen enough stand-up, you've seen some terrible stand-up too. You've seen some terrible sketch. I personally enjoy being in the room when bad comedy's happening because I find it joyous and fun to see people try things. But yeah, I mean, maybe, yeah, I think everyone, it's a fun, easy target to make fun of. That's okay, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for yourself as well, were you always interested in going into improv, or were you more interested in more traditional forms of theatre when you were first starting out too?
So I came to improv. I started improv at the Tokyo Comedy Store whilst I was writing a sitcom and living in a one-room flat in Shibuya. And I started improv because it's the opposite of how my brain works by default. Because I at least used to be and still kind of am like a perfectionist, and I want everything like planned, I want every detail checked. So I started improv to loosen up for writing, and then we probably put too much work into it, and then it sort of spiraled like an upward spiral out of control, I guess, is a way of putting it. So yeah, I didn't think I'd be doing improv even when I started doing classes. I thought I'd be using to loosen up for writing. And I married to Fawn, and we had the same passion about like, you know what, we've seen how other people are doing this. We were both writers. Let's see. Here's what we'd like to see. Here's what we think you could do that'd be really cool. And then we found Rachel already knew quite a few of the original cast that we brought in. I brought out the development. I had that same passion. Like this isn't just we're not just doing this just for doing it. We've got an idea to make an improvised play and really like get the most out of the medium. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
actually it's not just it's that alchemy between the different disciplines. I think is what's been our sort of secret sauce for this.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. And you've done a lot of screen work as well over your time too, as well as doing work on stage. How do you sort of find the balance between doing, theatre work and doing stuff for screen too?
Well, this is all the yin yang that like saves my life basically. Because film is wonderful, and it will also ruin your life if you let it. It can take years and years to get a film made. Sometimes you've got the film, you've done everything, and then you're just sitting waiting for music licensing for 6 months, or you're raising money and it takes you years. And in the meantime, while I'm doing that, I can go to a show where we come into a room, and nothing, 200 people laughed for an hour, complete circle, and we get to go home. So you get like the catharsis and that release. I think if I only did improv, I'd be wanting to do some projects that like have that like lasting power, that sort of, aliens will find this other human race is destroyed in 50 years kind of stuff. But if I only did film, I'd be too fed up waiting for that kind of release. So I think it's very good like having both.
Yeah, definitely. When you go out and see shows yourself as well as an audience member, do you tend to go and see things which are also improv, or do you go and see, different types of shows as well?
Oh yeah, I like seeing all kinds of shows. I mean, as a general thing, I love like pulling an influence from everywhere. It's like Jeet Kune Do stuff, you know. But I'm very lucky, especially in Edinburgh, to know some great improvisers. I know like if I go to see a show, if I go to see like a comedietta show, like it's going to be good. Um, I kind of seen it before, but it's different every time. So yeah, I see everything. And recently this year, I saw a lot of clowns specifically, which I found really inspiring. I saw some really, and again, another art form like I didn't think I'd be so into. Um, and then seeing the different things people did with it this year in Edinburgh, there are shows like Furioso, which is amazing. Gary Starr's always brilliant. And you see the shows, you go, oh, this is what you can do as well. This is something you can create for an audience. This is an experience. Uh, and that always broadens it. So yeah, I see bits of everything. And
Yeah.
probably musical theatre because I love musical theatre.
Yeah, speaking of musical theatre, I mean, I know that you also developed Your Flaws, the musical as well, and I was wondering, how different was it, developing a musical compared to, a non-musical?
Oh yeah, so that's like a whole it's a whole different world. And it's really fun. And it's again like a sub balance. So the two like other shows I do, like two like main live shows I do at the moment are CSI, 10 years. We've got a production team of five of us. It's super polished, a lot of support, a lot of teamwork and help on it. Your Flaws a Musical is myself, Emma Wesleyus, who's a professionally trained opera soprano, and Patrick Cloburn, who's a genius pianist. And that does not have a format. That is, we talk to the audience about specific shortcomings, and then we just make a musical about and explore it. So that is completely wild. Um, I started doing musical because I'm really bad at music by default. I've now grinded with a professional singing teacher, Robert Bicknell, who was Natalie Imbruglia's singing teacher as well, to the point that now I feel I'm good at it. But that is like the joy and the challenge of doing musical theatre. One of my favorite tweets, I think, explains a lot of life. Was your life becomes infinitely better when you accept that professional wrestling, anime, and musical theatre are all the same thing. So we can have other shows that do these sort of, we're playful and we're like tied into these things and when we're connected. But musical theatre is that full on anime, professional wrestling. This is objectively a ridiculous way to tell a story, but it's because the emotions are too big to tell in any sensible format. So we're singing them instead. And that's what
Yeah,
I mean. That's how people say about improv. Most art forms are objectively, if you explain to an alien, they're objectively kind of dumb. That's what makes them brilliant. That's what gives them a beauty and a purpose. Figure skating doesn't have that much practical application. It is so beautiful. It is so great. And when I see stuff like that, or when I see things like musical theatre or like improv or the clown and all the other things, you think like, if someone asks you, what do humans do? What do humans make? I'd love to show them stuff like that. Like, isn't that cool? Isn't this wonderful and weird and beautiful? Aren't you glad someone does this? I mean, birds are singing. We're figure skating and doing Starlight Express.
absolutely. Yeah, just as a last question, what do you hope audiences will take away with them when they come and see CSI?
I think they come away feeling excited to see more. I think they come away feeling confident that they can go to shows like this, maybe expand the company to see. A lot of audiences haven't seen improv before. We have a lot of awesome audience members that come in, and this is their first improv show, and they suddenly see that connection and the fact that they will win. When they interact, when they take chances, when they open up, they'll be rewarded and they're going to have a good time. I think that's what I really want people to take away.
Mm, absolutely. Lee Apsey, thank you so much for talking to us today.
Thank you very much.